Okay, we can get into the unwritten word, which takes us over to the divine word and the word of God. This is where we're going, okay? As I think I mentioned before, the early humans didn't have a verbal language, okay? When they came on board planet Earth, okay, they had to go by whatever little sounds they could make, and they could go by the animals and mimic the animals. And they did, in sounds, etc. And so, as we mentioned, one of the animals they mimicked was the cynocephalus ape, okay? And it's the baboon, the dog-headed ape. Cyno means dog, and cephalus means the head. So we have a dog-headed ape and the baboon. We all seen pictures of the baboon. We might not heard the sounds they make, unless you've been pretty close to them, you know. But we know that there are some people today living in Africa, maybe other places too by now, they could have moved around, that talk with sort of a clicking sound in their voice somehow. And the baboon did the same thing. So they copied off the baboon hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of years ago. Well, they copied off other animals too, such as the lion, the elephant, etc. This was their survival, you know. They didn't have verbal language. They could certainly make signs. These signs would be sign language. These sounds come under sign language because they're not verbal language, okay? So they mimic the animals, you know. But these folks had like fears, for example, fears of the powerful forces of Earth, such as lightning, thunder, rain, floods, volcanic eruptions, you name it. You know what I mean? They were afraid of these things. Now, the humans eventually start depicting things in the image of the human. But these people didn't. Our first ancestors, our ancestors, they didn't put themselves as, as to image these mighty forces of earth because they were afraid of them and they knew that their strength was not comparable to these powers of the elements, these natural forces, okay? But what they did, they noticed other animals. They noticed animals such as the rhino, the hippopotamus, the crocodile, the elephant, the lion. These were powerful beasts. And the human couldn't compare with them in strength either. So what they did, they compared these beasts, because they were so powerful compared to the human, they compared them with the elements of nature, okay? Like the lion, to put him in the sun. Well, he imaged the sun by the lion, with his golden mange and all that stuff, you know what I mean? And that's how they went about these things. So now, eventually, these people got into the stars. Well, they see the stars every night, you know what I mean? And they created constellations way back, okay? And they would put these animals, like the lion, the hippo, etc., draw these constellations, connecting the stars, making the constellations. and they would assign like animals, the beasts up there in the sky, and these constellations. For example, we have the constellation of the Great Bear. First, it was the hippopotamus that they put up there in the constellation of Ursa Major, which has 7 stars. Today, it's the Big Dipper. We call it the Big Dipper today. Well, it's the same group of 7 stars. Okay? Now, the tail of the Great Bear would go around. Each year, it would make the cycle, you see. The tail of the Great Bear, when it pointed south, it was summertime. When it pointed east, it was spring. And when it pointed north, it was winter. And when it pointed west, it was fall. They kept the seasons this way. And other things, well, you know, there's spaces still in between these seasons, you know, our seasons, you know. But with the Great Bear, they were able to tell when the planting season was coming, when the raining season, when the harvest season, because the Great Bear would tell the Great Bear would point it out each season. And these were people who planted, the grand folks and all that stuff, you know. So yeah, so they used the stars to come in handy to inform them of changes in the season. Oh, they did a lot more than that, though, you know. But still, they did this, you know. And so the hippopotamus in the Great Bear constellation becomes a goddess, you know. And, well, one of the names of the goddess of the Great Bear constellation, the hippopotamus, was Typhon. She even had a son. They called her Apt, too. Apt might have been before Typhon. The name Apt, A-P-T, okay. But we see the Great Bear constellation sometimes on paintings and reliefs and so forth. And we see this hippopotamus, okay, up there in the constellation. Sometimes she has a little hippo child with her, you know. And sometimes she carries a big knife, you know. She got that big knife for a while. She was the mother of time. Remember the tale? Kept time, kept the seasons, okay. She was the mother of time. Now, the big knife was used to cut time into sections. You know, like we've done that. We have the same thing. We have the hours of the day and night. That there are sections. Each hour is a section. We have the week. We have the month. These are sections. We have the seasons of the year. We have the year. These are sections of time. Well, the hippopotamus started this stuff off. Seemed like she started cutting time for us, for our ancestors. You know what I mean? So now she's a goddess. You know what I mean? But the hippopotamus made sounds, you know, before they even put her up there in the constellation. But the hippopotamus and the other animals here on Earth, you know, made sounds. And of course, they were nonverbal sounds, you see. But these sounds, okay, that sound in hippopotamus belong to the hippopotamus. Clear as that. That's very simple. But she's a goddess, right? And the lion up there in the San Rio or wherever, he's a god or goddess too. If it's a she as well, it's a goddess. And he made the sound roar, you know what I mean? I mean, you had the elephant, you had the other animals, the rhino, they all made some kind of sound. And so at times, you know, these folks had these animals up there. Now the zodiac, for example, has changed. The constellation, well, The stars haven't changed. But from culture to culture, nation to nation, other folks made up their own zodiac and placed their own animals, and animals that made up maybe their environment. Like our ancient ancestors did, the first folks who started doing this, they used animals in their environment. So anyway, we put these animals up there in the sky, you know. And these animals, you know, remember first they represented the elements here on earth. The natural forces, the forces of nature, like flood, rain, so forth and so on. So they were called the netters. They were called the netter. So Apt or Typhon, okay, well, they became goddesses. They called them goddesses. And so the sounds they made were unwritten. Nobody wrote them down. The sounds were used for people to somehow communicate with each other. You know, like I said before, like a lion's approaching, you roar. Okay. So the sounds then applied to the goddesses, like Apt and Typhon. Okay. Or the sun god. Their words then, if they're gods and goddesses up there, we put them up there, our ancestors did, then the words or the sounds that these animals made became divine words. And they're unwritten words. Nobody wrote down the word roar because they didn't have an alphabet. Right? So these words become the unwritten words, and because these sounds were made by the goddesses, the hippopotamus, this one and that one, they became the word of God, or the word of the netter. Translated into God, then it becomes the word of God. That's where you get the word of God from. It might be hard for you to believe. You may say, well, what's this guy talking about? Well, talking about the word of God, where it originated and how it originated. You know? Yeah, difficult to believe, I guess, for some people, because we've heard the word of God and we swore by God that it was the word of this God way up there in heaven somewhere. But I never heard him say anything. They say he's there. I haven't seen him. I haven't heard him say anything. I haven't seen his constellation either, but we see the Great Bear constellation and we see other constellations up there. There's plenty of constellations up there. Plenty of them, and they have animals assigned to them. People might have a human being in some way assigned to them, but that came later. But like I said, they didn't put the human being there to represent any of the forces. At first, they didn't even have a human being to represent in some way the wild beasts, like the hippo, because there was no comparison in these people's observations. They went by observation, right? Because they didn't have a cerebral cortex. They had observation. They could see. Said, wait, you can't compare with that beast. You know what I mean? I mean, definitely couldn't compare with great storms, thunder, and lightning storms, and the floods and the waters and the volcanic eruptions. We can't compare with that. But we put the beast there, you know, so the beasts represent these things. You know, like Leo the lion represents, or the sun at one time. Leo, I thought, may have been a dog, but the sun. So the lion represents the sun, you know. And so there we get the Word of God. We have the unwritten Word. We have the Word of God. So the unwritten Word goes way back because the people used sign language. They didn't have a verbal language like we do. So they used signs, you know. And that's how that came about, you know what I mean? So it was recognized. It was recognized in the mythology, you know what I mean? Because we see in the ancient Egyptian mythology that you have now, they've moved on after millions of years. So you have a human figure with the head of a jackal. We have a certain god, or the jackal, they call him Anup or Anpu. We have Sekhet Bass. We have Sekhmet. These belong to like the group of lions. You see the female, okay, with the lion's head. She has a lion's head. The goddess Bass, the goddess Sekhet, you know. Ta's wife was Sekhet. She had a lion's head. Well, okay, you know. I mean, so we tying out the lions in, the animals in with the humans now. Oh, this is here in the Canaanite mythology, which really wasn't that long ago, you know, 5,000 years ago. 4,000 years ago, you know, they brought all these things out, you know, and but how did they get to Egypt? Because this stuff with the hippopotamus and those animals, they first put some constellations up there. We was down there. They were down near the equator, but they even had the southern constellation that we can't see from here, you know. And so I don't think you can see them from Egypt either, you know. Well, folks were down there, and they migrated north. And when they migrated north, they took their gods with them and so forth and so on. And the Canaanite priests, ancient Egyptian priests, got them, you know, talked to the folks and got this and got that together and put it in the mythology. So we got the hippopotamus in mythology, we got the lion and the lioness, like the Sphinx. We talk about the Sphinx, you know. And the part of the Sphinx is a lioness, okay? And so that's where the divine word comes from. That's where the word of God comes from. That's where the unwritten word comes from. The written word is just that. It is a written word. So a guy asks a priest or a rabbi one time that he told me he wanted to learn, you know, the tradition, let's say, you know, which involves mythology. And so the priest, or whether it was a rabbi or priest, asked him, so what do you want to start with, the unwritten word or the written word? Well, the guy said the written word. And the rabbi turned him out, told him, no, get out. So the unwritten word, then, is more important in some way than the written word. Well, the unwritten word hasn't been tampered with. One thing, we still have it up there in the sky. You can't go up there and change that. You know, I mean, you can't change it. You know, let's put it like that. You know, and so it's trustworthy. The written word, well, it's written by human beings. That's trustworthy. You know, because of misinterpretations, etc., misplaced facts, and so forth and so on. You know, and so then this takes the value from the written word, you know, because they're afraid of the inaccuracies. So the value is placed on the unwritten word, not the written word. Put it like that. Okay. Thank you very much, and I'll talk to you folks again.